Good morning. This is JP Tremblay, CIO of Wealthnet Investment Management, and I'm joined by Llanes, founder and president of the firm. And today we would like to have a discussion about something that might be pretty close and near and dear to our clients and to everybody's heart right now, which is your 401k and your retirement money. I think we're hearing a lot of things. People are either in denial and don't look at their 401k, just assuming that it might be a bad news. And you have the other end of the spectrum where you have people probably looking at it too much, probably every day, and worrying about every little change in value. So today I'd like to maybe step back a little bit and look at what should investors do today in this environment. And Louis, I'm going to reach out to your experience with that. And so let's say I was affected by the coronavirus in my family. So let's say I have me and my wife have lost our job or some income as a small business, and I need some cash. Should I stop putting money into my retirement right now in order to preserve cash and use it for my basic needs, or what do you think is a good way to maybe weather this storm when you need maybe some cash?
Well, that's actually a complicated question because you have to actually look at your picture from a holistic viewpoint to answer the question, because everybody's situation is different. You may be in a situation where you just should stop making payments and to your 401k, if that makes sense, to reconcile your budget short term. Or you may be in a position where it could be as bad as taking a loan out from your 401k or looking at all your sources of funds. So that is not an easy question. Now, I know that is one of the biggest questions that a lot of people have, is what should they do if they're having hard times, and how do I get access to money? There's so many different ways to do that right now. If you're a small business owner, you may have access to other forms of cheaper credit or even forgivable loans. So that could be an option. There's also a provision now under the new plan where you could they've increased the amount that you can borrow from your 401ks up to $100,000. So it's not necessarily advisable to do that because you lose tax-deferred growth when you do that, because you basically lower the balances of your 401k and you lose that future growth. And there's even a provision now where you can pull money out of it entirely, not take a loan, and then you don't have to pay the 10% penalty if you're under the age of 59 and a half, because normally you would have a 10% penalty. Instead, you would pay the taxes on the amount that you pulled out, but you have 3 years to put the money back in or pay the taxes. So it's not a real easy question, and that really has to be looked at on a case-to-case basis. I wish I could say it was just a single answer, but it's really not. So.
Good. Hopefully you give at least some of the options here for people to consider and probably consult your tax or investment professional to help answer that question. Now let's focus on maybe the positive side of that. Let's say I do have some money right now and I'm trying to maybe put it to work. Just like us, you're getting excited by maybe some value being created in the market and some opportunities to invest. Let's focus on that. Where would you deploy money right now? Would you add to, again, probably a complex question to answer, but would you go into retirement, the tax-deferred account, into individuals, into other vehicles? How would you put new money to work right now if you had that?
So within we're talking about retirement plans right now. So within a retirement plan, there's a few things that we have to look at in order to figure out what is kind of the optimal situation for an individual. So the first is to understand what you can actually invest in. So what are the options that are available in your 401k or 403b? Also understanding what type of plan you have. There's a zillion plans. There's again, the 401k, there's a traditional 401k, there's a Roth 401k, there's a 403b, and they all have different rules. And so it's really important to know how much you can put into each one of those, and to know whether or not you should go for tax deferral or for tax free. So if you're younger, you generally want to go with a tax free Roth 401k type option, because you'll be able to get tax free growth. you won't get a tax deferral or a tax deduction in this year, but you won't ever pay taxes on that in the future as long as you meet the requirements. There are some requirements that you have to hold it for 5 years, and so it's not just easy breezy. You have to understand what the rules are on pulling the money out. But if you follow those rules, you'll never pay taxes on that. So for a younger person, that really can mean a lot for you in terms of more growth, especially if taxes increase in the future. So that's the first thing, is to understand what you have. Like the options that you have inside of your 401k many times is limited, because most companies, when they're dealing with setting up a 401k plan, they have to deal with a lot of rules, fiduciary rules. And a lot of times they'll use the conventional wisdom that less options is better, because they don't want employees to make bad choices. So what they tend to do is they tend to have very few asset classes in there. They'll have like US large cap, mid cap, small cap, and then they'll have international, and then maybe one or two bond options, and maybe money market, and that's it. The problem with that for many investors, and we see this day in and day out, is that there's a lack of diversification there. It sounds like it's diversified, but in reality, what's going on is that most of those, the vast majority of those funds are highly correlated. They're not really as diversified as you would think, especially when you have stress in the market, because they correlate more when there's stress in the market. So it makes it more difficult to manage. Sometimes it makes it more difficult to manage your 401k because you can't get the diversification that you need. But that is a big problem that we see in 401ks a lot. Another thing that we see with 401ks a lot is that there are basically 3 types of fees that are in plans that people don't recognize that are in the plans. One would be, your investment fees. Sometimes there's really low cost options that you can get into, like index funds, and there's not a whole lot of investment fees. So you really want to be cognizant of what those fees are for the funds that you can select. And then also there's administrative fees. You really can't do much about the next 2 categories of fees, administrative and fiduciary fees. Those are going to be there whether you like it or not. You don't necessarily see it as an employee, but they're there. So many times people feel like there's no fees with 401ks or 403bs, and that's not the case. So you want to analyze each one of those funds, and that's something that we help clients do, is analyze each one of those funds to see what are the fees, what are the returns, and is there a way, looking at all the different options, that we can construct a portfolio that has proper diversification, given what options are available to you. So it's not as easy of a solution as if you had money outside in a brokerage account where you could choose from a wide variety of different investments. The good news is many plans will allow you to have investment outside of there. They'll have what's called a brokerage link, and that'll allow us to invest that in a wide variety of investments. And it could be with a different brokerage firm. The 3 biggest brokerage firms that we tend to see that have that option is Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade, and Fidelity. So those are usually good options. So figuring out what to invest in and how to invest in really it involves looking at those fees, the returns, the risk, and how much diversification you can truly get in your plan. And again, it also really depends on your age and a holistic view in terms of should you be doing a Roth or should you not be doing a Roth, whether or not your employer is actually contributing to it as well. How much are they matching when you put money in? So that's another consideration. So there's a lot of considerations.
Good. Well, thanks for that. Something you mentioned, and I'd like to maybe go back to, is we've seen overall a reduction in the amount of the number of options, investment options in 401k plan. And I think so some of that, the trend started, you can think of Richard Thaler in his excellent book, Nudge, talks about, people don't tend to change the default selection, right? And I think based on that, I don't know what the statistics are, but I believe 80 cents of every dollar put into 401ks now found its way into some form of a target fund, their target date or target risk, where your money goes into one investment selection, and then someone somewhere manages the asset allocation to a specific target retirement date, allocating as they see fit between equity, fixed income, and other asset classes. Now, I wanted to ask you, what do you think of these products as an option for people versus maybe doing a much more thorough review of the investment options and making your own investment decisions across asset classes and the likes?
Well, it depends on what your options are in the plan. If you have a broad enough set of investments in your plan, you might be better off having a custom allocation for your situation that could be better for your situation, customized to you, than versus having just a target fund. But if you don't have that capability, then sometimes those target funds can be pretty good options. The advantage to those it depends on what kind it is, because there's target funds that actually adjust based on the age, and then there's target risk funds that target to how much risk you want to take. So if you have a fund that basically scales in more bonds over as you get older, sometimes those don't necessarily, they make assumptions that may not make sense for your situation. And the more money you put into it, the potentially worse off you could be, because you might have too much in bonds because they just assume you're going to really, really get heavy in bonds. And for most people, after you retire, you're going to live 20, 30, 35 years. After you retire, you're going to need to beat inflation, and that requires more equities than are assumed many times in these target date funds. The target risk funds, at least they keep a relative static risk target, and those can be better if you know what that risk target is for your plan. But again, you have to keep that in the context of your total picture. Yeah,
and I think that's what some people forget sometimes. You have to look at your entire picture, right? You have money in other location, whether it's also your spouse. So sometimes as a family, you also have to look at the entire asset allocation, and that's where sometimes you may be over allocating to a certain asset classes overall. So please, let's make sure that you look at the your entire picture, your entire goal set, and sometimes you need to over allocate into one area versus the other.
Well, one of the things that, not to interrupt you, I mean, one of the things that I've noticed is that people are ignoring their 401k. In fact, as I was looking at I watched the different news feeds for really smart people, and I saw several articles today that said, ignore your 401k. It basically said, don't look at your statements. And actually, I'm saying, no, look at your statements, figure out if you're doing the right thing. Because a lot of people are just not looking, and they're maybe not doing the right thing. I mean, we're seeing it every day where people are not doing the right thing. Once you put it all into the financial planning software and you look at the entire picture, we go, okay, we need to make an adjustment. In fact, rarely somebody doing it on their own has it all, holistically put together. It's pretty amazing. And it doesn't matter about the sophistication of the investor. It could be somebody who's, an executive, or it could be somebody who's, a teacher. It's just because I think what happens is we tend to not think of that first. We kind of put that on autopilot. We kind of have a mental bucket where we put it over here on the side and say, okay, well, I'm putting my money away. And I kind of just set it in these funds and let it go.
Mm-hmm. And it is usually long-term money if you are still in the accumulation phase of your active working life. And for that reason, you should not be necessarily acting on short-term volatility and type of market environment that we have. And I think what I found is people who have who act sometimes at the wrong time is because they are in the wrong risk tolerance portfolio. That means that they should expect a certain amount of drawdown as comes with every asset classes, but they realize they don't have the stomach for what they actually invested in, and that's when it forces people to make what could be in the long run probably a less than optimal decision for themselves in their financial futures.
Well, we have a resource for that. In the book that I wrote, Financial Freedom Blueprint, there's a chapter just on that. How do I know my risk profile is right? And there's basically 3 stools to it. And in that chapter, that one chapter on risk, it's very helpful to read that and so we'll provide that to anybody who asks us. You could just email us. We'll put a link. Just email us and ask for the book, financial freedom blueprint, and we'll give you that as a resource. Because that's when people pull the trigger at the wrong time. If you're overly aggressive, which is where everybody gets, and there's really a cycle. There's a cycle where people, after a bear market, everybody is more conservative than they should be, and then after we've been going up for 10 years, everybody is more aggressive than they should be. When in reality, we should not be doing that as much. So we should be more I wouldn't say static, but we should be more within a range that makes sense and for us long term. So if you need more information on that stuff, be sure to go to that link and get that book. We'll send it out for you, charged to you.
Great, thanks. That's nice offer for you from you, Louis. So maybe one thing to also discuss is, well, we live in a world, in a self-directed world where the money's been given to you and you're in charge of your investment decisions. That may or may not be a good thing. On the basis of that, everybody's level of sophistication, knowledge, and ability to do this varies widely, right? So when can people actually enlist the help of financial professional to help them make decisions, even in their 401k, because this is not money that you and I can necessarily put our hands on directly as investment advisors, but can we provide advice to clients into what they should invest in their 401k?
So, traditionally, most advisors would not really advise too much on them because they couldn't really manage them physically. And that can be a problem if you can't manage them physically. But now with new technology, with the ability to be able to link accounts and things like that are outside of brokerage firms that we directly manage, we can actually link accounts and then advise people on these accounts. So yes, the answer to that question is yes, you can actually do that. In fact, it's advisable to be able to have it more of a holistic view on that. Now, that can't be discretionary. It cannot be managed on a discretionary basis in all cases. Sometimes it can be, like, for example, if it's at Schwab or if it's at TD Ameritrade and your company has a brokerage link there, like some large firms like United Airlines and Lockheed Martin have that capability, then we can manage those directly for you, and we don't have to be in those funds that are only in a small bucket that's there. We can really invest anywhere, individual stocks and bonds, and have it really customized to your situation. So there's really two ways that we advise people on that. One would be on a consulting basis, where we review it periodically and we have it linked into your whole plan, and we can see it all together. And then we also have actually directly manage it for you if you have brokerage link capabilities. So
great. Well, if I follow, there's a few advice that you gave us today, and if I were to list them, you said first would be to, well, if you do need cash, if you're in a situation where that is, this is a pretty complex discussion to have with probably the right professional around you to make sure that you're taking the money from the right place should you need it. I also heard that we should be considering the holistic pictures, right? So when you make investment decision on your 401k, it is part of your entire financial situation, and however you invest that money should be done in a way consistent with your overall goals and objective. That was another point that you made. And the third one was also to be very mindful of fees in the investment vehicles that that are available to you. There's several layers of fees that you mentioned. Some are transparent, others are a little more hidden, but be mindful of them and make sure that you are wise in choosing that. Would that about sum up kind of the things to consider? Anything else you would like to add to the decision-making process?
Just a couple more things. One would be also keep in mind the diversification. So everybody's retirement plan has a set of opportunities that we can look at. So there's no one size fits all. You have to look at what your options are and then customize to it. So that has a lot to do with it. The other thing I would say is there are this whole thing with COVID-19 and being able to take out up to $100,000 and all that stuff. That's really something that is really important to understand. We'll put in the show notes a link to an article that we have on our website on the Secure Act that actually talks about what's in there. So we'll provide that. So use that as a resource if that's you. The other resource I would try to look at in our show notes that we'll make sure that we have in there is we have a piece on where will your retirement income come from, because a lot of people are not looking at it from the whole picture. We have Social Security, we have pension income, and then we have 401k money, and we have money outside of 401ks. We have Roths, non-Roths. So, check out that article too. So, just a few more resources for you as you're thinking about the whole retirement situation.
Yeah, and since most people are at home today and have a lot of time, maybe they can order your book and give it a good read. There's a lot of good insight in that book.
Now's the time to do it. Yeah.
Very good.
We want to give you resources. So, if you're not working with us, fine, but, take a look at these resources if you're, looking at different things. And if you need help, be sure to contact us. You can always contact us and let us know. We'll see if we can help you out.
Great. Well, great discussion, Louis. Thank you very much for your insight in that. Hopefully this was helpful to you. JP Tremblay, Louis Llanes signing off. Have a great day. Thank you.
You too.